Hi, my name's Phil. I like to talk about politics, and committees are fun, aren't they? Committee meetings that go on forever are fun, and yesterday I was treated to Michael Gove giving some questions and answers with the Brexit Select Committee, and what I'd like to do is go through some of the highlights for that. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news in politics, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, it went on for a long old time. I didn't actually sit through the whole thing. I sat through about 50 minutes of it. It took about half an hour before he even answered a question. So a few questions that he was asked that he was unable to answer. First of all, Michael Gove announced a few months ago that, we're going to need to expand our border force to deal with Brexit. It's like, no kidding, really? You should have known that years ago. Why haven't we been expanding our border force for the last few years? But they say, we should do this now. So he was asked how many we'd actually recruited for this. And he wasn't able to answer that. He didn't know. He had no idea. He said, we're recruiting people. Yeah, nice. How many have you recruited? I don't know. So we don't know how many we've actually recruited or how close it is to the target that we need to recruit. Never mind. Then he was asked, so what kind of checks are we planning between Great Britain and Northern Ireland in line with the Ireland Protocol there? And he said, of course we need to do what's best for the people of Northern Ireland. But he couldn't actually say what that was. No idea. So what checks are we actually going to be needing then? I don't know. Probably some. Maybe some. That was it. That was what we got there. He was then asked about, will there be any difference compared to now in the movement between Great Britain and Northern Ireland? Because obviously there isn't at the moment. And then he seemed to suggest that there might be for animal products derived from animals. So basically he was saying, there'll be some differences, because obviously Boris Johnson has been quite keen to say there'll be no difference at all, completely free movement, no checks in the ROC, all the rest of it, even though the UK government has committed to these. So Michael Gove was sort of saying, yes, but we can't say what those differences will be. Again, he kept deferring to another committee. But the problem is, if you've got a committee right now who's still working these details out, we're running out of time here. There's a few months left to go. And when you consider normally when countries converge and they form a trade agreement with themselves, it sometimes takes a while to implement the necessary changes. Several years is not unusual. So we haven't even decided what the changes need to be yet. And we haven't got years. We've got to the end of this year. But anyway, then he was asked, so what about transport organisations, haulage groups and things like this? Various groups representing the people who actually transport our goods between the UK and other parts of the EU. And the chair of the Select Committee, Hilary Benn, was saying, look, these groups are wanting an extension to the transition period. They do not want Brexit at the end of this year. And he asked Michael Gove, he said, why do you think they're saying that, Mr. Gove? Why do you think they're saying that? And his first response to that was, well, you better ask them. And he was saying, no, I'm asking you why you think they're doing that. And he was saying, I don't want to speak for them. And the point that Hilary Benn was trying to make, and then he made this clear to Mr. Gove, was that I'm not trying to find out what they think. I know what they think. I know what they say. I want to know, are you talking to them? Because if you're the minister in charge of Brexit, and trade, of course, is going to be ultra important, why are you not talking to the people who actually transport goods between the UK and the rest of the EU? Because if you don't know why they want the transition period extending, that suggests you're not talking to them. So again, he didn't really come up with an answer for that either. Don't worry, we will get to some answers he did give in a moment. Maybe. Then he came up with the government's stated position at the moment is we're not just going to carry on with negotiations to the end of the year and go, sorry, we didn't agree on anything, and then crash out. The government's stated position, its official policy, and it is its official policy, this has been officially stated, is that when we review the situation in June, because as part of the timetable, the EU reviews the situation in June, we review the situation in June and see if anything's realistic at that point. And the UK's position is if it doesn't feel sufficient progress has been made, it's just going to walk away from the talks. So there won't be any more talks. That'll be it. Gone. forget it. Fine. Okay, that's the government stated position. So Hilary Benn then asked Mr. Gove if that was still the government stated position, and he refused to say. He just refused to answer it. And that's really bizarre, because it is official government policy. So if it's still government policy, then you can just say so, because at the end of the day, it's Boris Johnson's policy. You can just say, yeah, as the Prime Minister said, blah, 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 that is still our position. But he didn't. But he also didn't say that the position changed either. He just point blank refused to answer the question. So then he was asked if the timetable, so there were other members of the committee asking as well, and he was asked if the timetable was still realistic given the economic shock of the coronavirus pandemic. And Michael Gove said that he thought so. So this was actually the first question that he did actually answer. And he said he thought so because the UK is not asking for anything that's different to other countries. In other words, we should just be able to pick up an agreement that the EU has with another country, another unnamed country, and just adopt that. Now, obviously, that's a lie, because he did technically answer the question, but he answered it with a lie, because obviously that's not what we're asking for, and it's certainly not what we're getting. Then he was asked by another member of the committee, Will David Frost, who is the chief negotiator for the UK, will he be available for scrutiny by the Select Committee? And, Michael Gove says, well, if the committee wants to talk to him, then I'll ask him, which is a really bizarre thing to do. You don't ask him. If the committee wants to speak to him, he's summoned. But anyway, he said, he'll ask him. And I thought to myself, well, this is a bit odd, because the committee had already asked. And, because this was a question from the last time they met, when they were asked, can we talk to David Frost? Michael Gove said, I'll ask him. So then we come again, and he's saying, can we talk to David Frost? Yeah, I'll ask him if you want to talk to him. We've already just said we wanted to talk to him. So, never mind that. But then a question was asked, why is the government, the UK government, rejecting the proposal for an EU technical base in Northern Ireland? Now, Gove said, he did admit that the protocol says that the EU can have officials to monitor the UK officials in the checks. He says that the checks themselves would be carried out by UK officials, but the process can be monitored by people from the EU. That's all fine. But he said there's no need for a mini embassy. At which point it was pointed out that no, we're not talking about an embassy here, because that would be for diplomatic purposes. What we're talking about is a technical base for these officials that you say we're absolutely fine with. And she actually pointed out where in the agreement that we have signed, in fact, that we came up with, it says that. It's Article 12, says that the UK government should facilitate EU officials. So there needs to be EU officials there monitoring the process. And, and he had no answer again for this one. He kept saying, my understanding is. He used the phrase, my understanding is, quite a lot. Now that, if you didn't already know, is political speak for, I'm lying. I know I'm lying. You know I'm lying. But just in case there are any consequences for me lying later on, I'd like to be able to feign ignorance. So, so instead of being able to definitively state the case, which he should be able to do, because he is the minister who should know this, on what grounds they have refused that base of operations, that office for the EU, which is all it is. It's not an embassy, it's an office. But by using the phrase, my understanding is, he's clearly just playing on the fact that a politician doesn't need any brains or qualifications to do their job, and you can always say later on, well, it's a complex situation, I didn't seem to understand it correctly. But obviously, needs to say, he didn't get any answers there either. But he did say, yes, the EU officials have got a right to monitor it. But if you've got EU officials in Northern Ireland monitoring this process, then of course they need an office. I mean, how else are they supposed to operate without an office? But anyway, very much a statement that he made to appeal to the single-digit IQ supporters of his particular brand of madness. Then a pro-Brexit member of the committee fed into it. Obviously, you're going to get this. Bear in mind, of course, these committees are cross-party. The Conservatives have the majority in Parliament. There's going to be a fair few of those on the committee, perfectly right and proper. But obviously, they are going to be the ones to soft-soap the minister. And a pro-Brexit member of the committee was, first of all, asked a question that should have been quite simple for him, but he still managed to ask it up. Anyway, let's get this cringe out of the way. So, she was asking him basically about, state aid and, well, she was basically asking about state aid things, in terms of the withdrawing from the EU. And Michael Gove, bizarre answer. All he had to do was say, yes, you're right. This shows the importance of leaving the EU, because then, we're not bound by their state aid rules and border restrictions at a time of crisis like this, where we need to be able to ignore those state aid rules and ignore the normal border procedures. And yet, without being prompted, he actually said, he admitted that when it came down to it, EU countries were able to do whatever they wanted with their borders. They could put in whatever restrictions they wanted, and they could ignore the normal state aid rules. Because one thing that needs to be pointed out about state aid rules is that there are clauses in there for emergencies. So the fact that Michael Gove actually said, when it came down to it, the EU rules didn't actually stop any single EU country from doing whatever it needed to do to get through this crisis. It could put in border restrictions as it pleased. It could, funnel massive amounts of money into the economy, propping up businesses and paying people's wages. It could do whatever it wanted, and it could come up with whatever rules it wanted, because different EU countries have different rules in determining which businesses get that state aid. They're not all doing the same thing, going by the EU rules, because it's a time of emergency. So that was a bit bizarre. So we even managed to ask that up. Then she came up with the old fisheries thing, because this is the drum to bang to bang for the Brexit supporters. So she was feeding him with the fisheries thing, about, is it reasonable for the EU to have this fisheries policy they've got? And Gove was basically saying, it's a bit of a cheek, isn't it, that the EU are still wanting the same fisheries arrangement, even though it doesn't for other countries. And you think to yourself, well, what's supposed to happen is the EU have proposals. They've published a full 350-page series of proposals, which includes fisheries. And obviously, unsurprisingly, the EU said, well, we would like the fisheries policy to be along the same lines as it is now. Obviously, they've done that. Now, if the UK has a problem with that, what you're supposed to do is you go, okay, that's your proposal. We don't agree with it. Here's our counter proposal. This is what we think would be better. But they haven't done that. They haven't done it at all, because they don't want to present any proposal. But so he was saying that, and then she said, to clarify the point, so what you're saying is that the EU are treating other countries like Norway and Iceland and places like this as sovereign nations, but they're not treating the UK the same. He said, that. And I'm thinking to myself, no, because the EU have fisheries agreements with those countries. They're not treating us any different. They want a fisheries agreement with the UK, just like they have fisheries agreement with the other countries. So that was just a blatant lie as well. Not remotely true. Then he was asked by another member of the committee, how many draft legal texts have we shared and how many still to go? So Gove said that we've shared our proposal, except we haven't at all, because I've checked what we've shared. Now, he did say, and he was clear about this, he said, because this is important for later, he said that the only legal text we have not yet shared with the EU is on fisheries. And again, why? He said, it's to show them that we're serious about fisheries. You show them you're serious about fisheries policy by showing them your fisheries policy. Because again, like I say, negotiations work in one side prepares their proposal and they show it to you and you go, I don't agree with this. Okay, well, what's yours then? Oh, here's ours. And then you try and work them together. But we haven't provided one. But anyway, so Michael Gove very, very clearly said there, we've provided all the text we're going to apart from the fisheries one. Now, at this point, if you hear any member of the government say that we are trying to negotiate a comprehensive agreement with the EU, they are lying. Or Gove was lying, whichever, because what has been shared so far from the UK side is not a comprehensive trade deal, minus, even if you just say ignore the fisheries bit, is everything else what you would expect to see in a comprehensive agreement with the EU? No. There's loads of things missing. Loads of things. So basically, what the UK government is after is a series of bilateral agreements. And actually, with further questioning, Michael Gove said that. He said that what the UK wants is a series of bilateral agreements like the EU has with some other countries rather than an overarching agreement. So he said it himself. We're not actually after a comprehensive deal. That's what he said. And then later on, he also referred to the comprehensive legal text provided by the EU. And then he gave some nonsense reasons why the UK hadn't published its own. So I'm thinking, well, hang on a minute. You just said that the UK shared all legal texts apart from the fisheries one. And now, and I know that they haven't provided a comprehensive text. But now he's saying, yeah, and the UK hasn't yet provided its comprehensive legal text. It's like, but you said before the only legal text to still provide was the fisheries one. So to the same person in the same committee in the same meeting in the same quarter of an hour, he was saying on the one hand, we've provided all the legal text we're going to, apart from fisheries. And then, yeah, we've got this comprehensive one that we haven't shared yet. Afraid at this point I did have to stop watching. This about 50 minutes in before my monitor suffered. Not so much frustrated by Gove's behaviour, it's what you would expect. The reason for select committees to call this out. But it's because the committee is not drawing attention to it. And I don't know whether it's because of the remote nature of it. Because in an actual committee, select committee, what you see is when a minister says something that someone else can pipe up and go, hang on a minute, before you just said this. That wasn't happening at all. And I don't know whether it's the remote nature of it and everyone taking it in turns and not feeling or not being able to go, hang on a minute, you just said before then. So, but that's my take on it anyway. That's what I could stand of the proceedings. It's, not looking good, is it? But then it was never looking good, was it? But that is the latest from Michael Gove's questions to the Select Committee, apart from what may have happened after the 50th minute when I had to shut it down. But I hope you found the video interesting anyway. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, then please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.